Alex, the Skip Guru Price. We got him. He's the director of training and development at LocateSmarter. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Joel. It's my honor, sir.
And Alex is a friendly face that I've seen at many of the American Recovery Association conferences, the NARS conferences. At the last NARS conference, we said, hey, we got to get you on the pod because, I think the background of who I am and how I understand things kind of lends itself to why I'm interested. And it's that I'm interested. I'm like a armchair kind of scientist when it comes to auto and all the stuff that goes into it. But I'm not an expert in the back end, like the recovery stuff, at least at a practitioner level. And so, Alex, you and I were talking before we recorded that market conditions, the rest of it, I think Skip is going to become more of a thing. And especially for people that have been able to maybe accumulate more portfolio in the recent years, and they haven't really been confronted with a lot of the bumpiness. That is, once you remove the stimulus and once you remove once you take into account the fact that we have some serious inflation issues, it's going to start getting a little sticky. So we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that, but to get started, Alex, can you, for folks like me that I don't know the whole history of Skip and how it kind of developed. I assume that recovery professionals were doing it, are still doing it. And then there's specialty folks that do it as well. Like, can you kind of walk us down a little bit of memory lane and how the kind of industry came up and how you got involved in it?
Yeah, when you think of skip tracing, it's as old as time, really. Anytime you had someone leave town owing a bar tab or a hotel tab, that's where the phrase "they skipped out" actually came from. And of course, that was a crime. So people would go looking for that individual, and they were tracing the skip tracer. I can take skip tracing as far back to the 1800s, which is a gentleman by the name of Eugene Vidocq, who's known as the father of criminology. He was one of the first cats ever to do fingerprints or cast impressions. He was actually a criminal who became a confidential informant for Scotland Yard, and he later became the first private investigator in Europe. And that led to him writing numerous books. His whole life story is just unbelievably interesting, but he ended up writing a book that said Scotland Yard's secret weapon, skip tracing. And it's interesting because when you read that book, which I have a copy of it, it talks about talking to neighbors, the local bobby or the policeman on that particular street, relatives, all the stuff you still do today. Myself, I was right out of the Army, and I was big into powerlifting when I got out of the Army and working at a couple of bars bouncing. And I met this young lady that I thought was special. My dad was a Chevrolet dealer, and he said if I met someone special, I needed to get civilized, and he got me a job at the bank. And I was what was called a field representative. And basically, simplistically, I knocked on doors, asked people for their money or their car keys. And one day I was in the bank, because you spent 2 years out in the field, going in the office and working a queue was considered a promotion. I was in the bank talking to the bank manager and asking him what happened to all the accounts that people weren't where they sent me, and he explained how the queues worked and charge off. And I said, well, what happens once they're charged off? And he said, they're in a big filing cabinet in the back. And I asked him, sounded interesting, could I take a look at some of those files? And he actually laughed at me and said, yeah, sure. I tell you what, for every one you find, we'll give you $100 cash. It was a few months later, I was making more in the bonus than I was in the salary. And that led to me leaving that bank and going with a very little known company in the US at the time. It's one of the first 50 people Jim Moran hired at World Omni and was there running skip charge off, the agents, so forth. And I'm not really cut out for the corporate world. I left. It's been a big shock to most people, I'm sure. So I left, opened up my own skip company, sold it, got on the data side, really loved creating on this side, coming up with products nobody else has thought of. And for the past decade, I've basically traveled over 200 days a year, coast to coast, border to border, teaching skip tracing. I still write. I've written a couple of books, so it's been a very blessed career.
How has it changed? I mean, I'm thinking back in the old days, you probably had a lot of just hitting phone numbers using the phone book. And then take it to today. Like, I mean, I think of revolutionary things such as the internet or, other, big deal things that really move the needle. What were the revolutionary things that you've seen over the span of your career within skip tracing? Things that you said, man, this thing really it really does help. It really just took off.
Well, when I first started in this industry, we didn't have a computer at the bank. If you wanted to verify somebody made a payment, you called the teller. Mm. Or the customer, when he was in the teller line, would have the teller call and say, hey, John Debtor's here making his payment. Great. Everything was worked off collection assignments. So we had the old crisscross books that weighed about 100 pounds each, telephone on your desk, pay phones in the field. I remember thinking I was James Bond when we got our first beeper. and I swear, and there'll be a lot of young people that have to Google this, but I thought I was Sonny Crockett from Miami Vice with my first cell phone.
I mean, you almost make it sound like the lines are blurred between skip tracing in those days and being like a PI.
To a certain degree, I mean, a private investigator. Most skip tracers back then had a private investigator's license.
Yeah,
because it was something that you could show if you were in an apartment complex and security wondered why you were there.
Yeah,
that there wasn't a recovery agency license back then, so most auto recovery guys back in the day had a PI license as well. Mm-hmm. And then you had no regulations, all kinds of stuff. And if you fast forward to today with the internet, the databases, LPR, and everything in between, cell phones. Remember the first cell phone? I call it the Gordon Gecko phone. It was like 2 foot long. Now you got phones that get smaller and smaller as we go, but not a lot's changed. The process of skip tracing remains pure. It remains the same. The only thing all this technology has done is it's made me more organized.
Yeah.
Or the average skip tracer. And we live in the information age, but better than that, we can have it now. With the click of a mouse, I can run a comprehensive report on somebody, and I can have more data in 2 seconds than what used to take us 2 months to gather. Because remember, if I wanted something from a courthouse, I had to drive there, wait in line, use a mimeograph, pay a penny a page. If it was too far away for me to drive, I had to make a friend. They had to do that same process and mail it to me because there was or read it and I'd write it down. Agents back then took their assignments over the phone. Imagine doing that today in a compliant world. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it from a pure procedural, how I would work accounts today versus how I worked them 3 decades ago, nothing's changed.
And generally speaking, like from a 101 standpoint, like I'll give you an example. So when I was in college, I had a summer job building decks, right? Like people's backyard decks on their houses. So first you dig these holes and you fill them with some concrete and you put in your footers, and they're the big 6x6s, and they all stand there, and then they're bolting like a big main piece to the house, and then we're building the joists and all this, and everything kind of builds from there. The guys that train me, they never walked me through the process. They never said, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing this first, right? You gotta put in the footers because they got to set, and the concrete has to be a certain depth for code and to hold the weight. And I said, man, this is like everything in life. Before I start going down, like if somebody say, hey, Joel, you got to go skip an account. I just kind of want to understand like the top down, like, where do I start first? My guess in my mind would say I would start with the information that I already have, like the information in the borrower file. Start there, and then just keep pulling strings as you find little places to go. But I'm an idiot, and you're the expert, so I'm gonna ask you, how do you kind of think to describe to somebody how do you conceptualize, how do you wrap your head around going down the path of skipping somebody?
Well, you touched on the first thing. I always want to review the complete file. I want to, because more often than not, there are more leads in that complete file than anywhere else. People just get so caught up in they have a skip or a potential loss in their queue that they turn this individual into a mythical creature like a leprechaun or unicorn, not realizing just from pure human behavior, hadn't changed at all. He's still doing the same things he's always done. He's just doing it in a different area. So I want to read all the notes, going back to the beginning, when it was in underwriting, if I possibly can. Anytime anybody on an auto dialer talked to him, what was said, what neighbor said, all of that. And then I'm going to start with one thing that today's skip tracers don't start with that's imperative. And I got to start with the why. The only reason why anybody skips out on a debt is they've hit what I call a speed bump in life. And it's never positive. It's the loss of a relationship, the loss of a loved one, an addiction, an arrest, any number of those things. So once they hit that speed bump causes them to break the bridge in between them and the people in their inner circle. So when you're calling someone's reference and they say they haven't heard from them in 6 months, they might be telling the truth, because we all have inner circles, but as we go down the path of life, the inner circle changes.
Yeah.
You're not you're not friends with the same people you were with high school, your last job. Neither am I. I've made new friends, other friends I've lost touch with. So that's what I start with. I start with why, because once I know why the individual is acting in this manner, that's going to lead me to the new core group of people they're surrounding themselves with, which goes to the other mistake that most skip tracers today make is I start with why, and I'm not looking for Joel Kennedy. Joel Kennedy's a skip. He's not going to have anything in his name, probably. He's hunkered down somewhere. So why am I going to work like a mule looking for Joel? I want to find the people that are in your orbit. And once I find those new people that are in your orbit, they're going to lead me to you.
So hearing that described in that particular fashion makes me think that if I ever need to skip on something, it would behoove me to have zero social media presence.
Yeah, but it's hard to. That's difficult for most people to do, and I go back to human behavior. There's not a lot of absolutes when you talk about human behavior or human nature, but there are a couple. And really digging into it, which it's what I do, some of the absolutes are everybody's insecure and suffering of something. everybody is seeking approval of some kind, and that can be in just something as simple as a good job or a raise or a promotion. We're all seeking acceptance. Boom, I'm going to stop right there. That is what has made social media the juggernaut giant that it is, because we're all seeking
Yeah.
acceptance, and that is fed with the different groups we're in, people liking our post, and how, I don't care who you are, you post something and it gets 500 likes, you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's difficult for someone to stay away from social media. I've only ever seen one true skip in my entire adult life. As far as a true skip, anybody can be found, but business 101 has to be applied at some point, and that's, you don't want to spend $5,000 on $1,000 car.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to keep in touch with somebody. Everybody's going to lead some kind of trail. That one true skip, the only one I've ever seen, is a cat who it's not even his real name, but DB Cooper. Yeah. He's the only true skip. He committed that crime. He disappeared. Nobody, his own family didn't even know who he was. So he kept that secret so well. And those simpler days of, I can't walk to the mailbox or back without getting caught on a Ring camera or something. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, the world is totally different, right? So my dad was doing some genealogy, and one of our ancestors, it branches out. This may be, I think this is how the story goes. The guy was living in Scotland, and he had too many debts. So they threw him in jail, right? That's a brilliant idea. I'm going to earn off these debts while I'm sitting in prison. Okay. Well, the guy's sitting in prison. They said the prison's full. We're out of space, so we got to ship you over to the new colonies. So he gets stuck on a ship and pulling up on Virginia or North Carolina or something like that, and these pirates take over. They say, we don't want to have anything to do with y'all. We just want the boat. We want the ship and the provisions. So they dumped him off on land. So his name was spelled like Canedy. It was Kennedy. But it was spelled differently. So he just straight up changed his name. It said, see ya. I'm not going to bother with these debts anymore. What do you want the guy to do, right? You dump him. The pirates took the ship. He's on this. Might as well, right? I don't have to blame the guy. But it's old school, and you got a DB Cooper thing. I'll tell you my other little story here is, I am convinced, Alex. I am convinced that if I wanted to go somewhere on the planet and never see someone that I know, you'd have to go super deep. I have been all over the United States, random places. I just happened to bump into somebody that I knew in life. I always see somebody. I was in Granada, Spain, on vacation with my wife. Just browsing around the town, doing the traveler tourist thing, bump into a very good friend of mine who I knew in DC for years. And just totally random. Like, it was not planned. He's the kind of guy that I probably should have known that he was there at the same time, but we just bump into each other. Alex, like to go truly DB Cooper, like I think you have to go really, really deep. And I would imagine that people do stuff like enhance their image, right? Enhance their, not just changing your name, but like plastic surgery and this whole thing. I have to imagine.
Well, it was the perfect crime here. The sketch that is done by him, when they do one of those sketches, they'll talk to a number of different witnesses. So that sketch is a composite of everybody that was on that plane, the stewardess, etc. So that's not what he probably even remotely looked like. A lot of times they can get pretty close, but they've proven over the years that the sketch of his was not exactly the best. But what he was able to do is just violate every human nature while you have. I mean, we're social creatures. We have to have companionship.
Yeah.
Um, he also, not a dime of that money ever ended up in circulation. So why did he do the crime to begin with?
And you think that guy's still alive?
From everything that I've ever read, my uncle was in the FBI. That's why I probably do what I do for a living. He would be in his late 80s, so it's possible. But the History Channel had a great documentary called DB Cooper Case Closed. And I think they solved it. And the guy that they think did it with all the circumstantial evidence they have was living overseas and he recently died. And it's the only case in FBI history that they ever closed. They've never closed a case. That one, there's not an active investigation going on it right now. And why would they? The statute of limitations is up on that particular crime. Not a dime's ever gone out into circulation. If they did find him, it would just be for, their own self-serving pat on the back. And he's probably 88 years old now. So they're not even putting him in prison if statute of limitations was up.
So the money was never put into circulation.
They found $3,000 of the money buried along the riverbank. A kid did on a camping trip with his mom and dad. And that in itself is even suspect because for the money to have been found there, it would have had to have gone upstream, not down.
My mind is blown on how somebody could do this, right? So this whole he divorced himself from everybody that he knew. He had to. It's really it's hard to imagine you can.
Or he didn't. He just didn't tell anybody what he did.
Well, but it's like just to even pull a lot of these things off. Like, how do you do it without assistance, right? Like, you have to let somebody know something at some point. In most ways in life, when you're trying to get something done, it's very hard to do everything just completely solo.
And if you think of mysteries, that one is the biggest, head scratcher.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Jimmy Hoffa was killed and chewed up, put in the ocean in oil drum, something.
Yeah.
And, everybody knows Amelia Earhart. That was some sort of accident and her plane's at the bottom of the ocean. And, there's other theories, but you got two main constant mysteries, and one's DB Cooper and the other across the pond is Jack the Ripper. Who was he?
Oh yeah. Yeah, these are fast. They're mythical, right? They have this personification.
I spent literally my entire adult life studying the DB Cooper case because this isn't just what I do. It's become who I am. It's what I read. It's what I watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that about you without even really knowing you real well.
I will say for everybody that's getting ready to get tidal waved.
Yeah.
With work.
Yeah. And this is a transition. I do want to talk about that. So please. Yeah.
You had, of course, COVID, and you have to remember people are nomadic creatures by nature, and COVID made that even worse. But once they got where they were going, they were hunkered down for a period of time, and during COVID, you had 4 or 5 stimulus checks, you had PPE loans. You had the single largest unemployment bonuses, if you will. So people that made $40,000 a year weren't working, but yet they were making $70,000. And the clients went out, rightfully so, and gave extensions because that would have been a bloodbath that would have been unprecedented. So that was a perfect storm. People were given 6, 8, 9-month extensions, plus they were getting all that money and they weren't working. And now we're coming out the other side of the rabbit hole. You can't hide bad debt forever. And everybody's starting to see geographically, of course, busier in some areas than in others. And very few people are going to be where they once were.
Been a massive, I don't want to call it a diaspora. I mean, but you're right. Everybody's all spread around. I mean, where are the major areas? I mean, is it the move from the metro areas to more rural areas, Alex? Is that what you've been seeing, or is there kind of like migration that's a little bit more evident, like California to Texas, that I've been hearing a lot about, but probably just because I live out here?
Well, that's more of a political and monetary reasons, people leaving states that are overtaxed. I mean, we're all overtaxed, but
Yeah,
even more so in those states, New York and others. But I think people did get a sense of safety and security by moving out of the city,
yeah,
if you will, where they're always elbow to elbow with somebody, and moving where there's a little bit more leg room.
yeah.
I mean, I got an acre and a half, and I could own this acre and a half in New York or California or Portland or in any number of different states other than here.
Yeah,
But as people are starting to skip again, it's something I've done my entire career. Is I categorize skips into one of three buckets. And once I know what type of skip I'm dealing with, I instantly know what direction to take the file, what to do next. And when you're talking about this, you have to go back to what I said about speed bumps in life.
yeah,
You've got the out of pocket skip, and that's the individual that's relocated for, in their mind, a valid reason. They're going to catch the debt up. They have every reason to, but they've used all available cash for the relocation. You have the intentional skip. There's someone that they played the game before, they've been repossessed before, arrested before, or somebody in the family has. Those guys are usually always still local. And then you've got my favorite skip, which is the fraud. And something key that people don't use. We live in a 128 character or less world where everybody is either texting, schmexting, tweeting, or something, and we've forgotten how to communicate. My wife and I have a date night, and I love going to dinner with you and looking around the room, because even when I'm at NARS or I'm teaching, I'm studying everybody and making little notes. Well, I look around the restaurants and there's husband and wives on their date night, and both of them are like this.
yeah,
Their meal to come. We leave my wife and I leave our phones in the truck
yeah,
when we go inside the restaurant, because it's just, our time, but we've forgotten how to communicate.
yeah.
And communication is everything to a skip tracer, being able to talk to anybody about anything. I'm probably the only cat in the state of Alabama that doesn't watch NASCAR, but I purposely study NASCAR and know a little bit about it, and a driver or whatever that I can use as a way to start an instant conversation with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Or any number of different things that I might not have an interest in, but I'll keep up with it for that very reason. And I don't usually like to go to meetings unless I know who's in them, so I can go on LinkedIn and see if we know common people, if we've worked common places, did both of us serve in the military, because those are those conversation starters.
Yeah,
Because most skip tracers are also collectors, and they don't have the ability to take one hat off and put the other one on. So they're talking to people still in that collector frame of mind. and they're holding interrogations and not conversations, and then shocked when they're getting limited results.
Yeah.
Or the worst, they've gotten so dependent upon technology that they're truly not skip tracing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I can think of how you have the GPS device maybe equipped in the vehicle, or like you said, if you have your files constantly being scrubbed by an LPR type company, that will strip off a certain layer of effectiveness. You're not really skipping. You're tracing the person because they've given you access, or you have this information.
You're doing what I call skip guessing. You're throwing everything that you can up against the wall. And lenders today have forgotten some very universal, simple truths.
Yeah.
One they're real good at, and that's if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. They actually over document with, asking for daily updates. But the other one to me is early recognition. It fascinates me that people wait until someone's 75 days past due to get it out to someone that's a professional in the field, or at 75 days past due, upload it to a hot list. You're playing the most expensive game of hide and seek in the world, and you're giving the cat 75 days or longer to hide. No wonder they win most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to add a month to that 75 last time you made a payment, right? I mean, this is, that's a long time. And, think about how long it takes to drive your car from end of the country to another end of the country.
But from my perspective, I love it, because by doing that, it creates more skips. It creates more opportunities for me to train. It creates more opportunities for people to use data.
So you mentioned it a couple of times, Alex. So can you tell the folks kind of, you have some expertise that you put to play as a director of training and development at LocateSmarter. Sounds like you have some training programs that you do for the repossessors if they want to do some skipping, but then also for lenders. Is that true?
Been doing it for years. That's what I did for DRN for over a decade, as I traveled the country and taught skip tracing. And of course, COVID ended that fast, hard, and in a hurry. And I stared at the ceiling and then started playing like everybody else did in this Zoom world. So I've developed a number of different classes for a multitude of different industries on LPR meets human behavior, communication through human behavior, technology and skip tracing, a number of different classes. I'm also, being back in the data world, I'm able to create, and there aren't any that I know of. I'm not going to say there's not one, because that'd be laying an absolute count on you. I don't want to do that, but I don't know of another skip tracer with any of the data companies. So they don't think the same way. So LocateSmarter has honored me in allowing me to work with their dev team to come up with some really creature feature type of products here in the future that all come from the chaos of my head. So yeah, I'll be doing a lot of Zoom seminars. I still plan on doing on-sites and lunch and learns and so forth, like I've always done, maybe just not as often, because for me, COVID spoiled me. If you think about it, over a decade, I was in nothing but airports and hotels, and I got to spend 24 months in this office with my bride, spent more quality time with her than I have in probably 2 decades.
Yeah.
So now it's difficult to get me to leave the house.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's really good. Because I was thinking of the opposite, like when a lot of couples, one of them retires and the other one can't wait to get them out of the house.
There are times where she'll look at me and say, "When are you going out of town again?" And that's when I know I've kind of worn out my own welcome.
Well, that might be a good place to kind of put a little punctuation mark on this. Alex, what's a great, if folks want to talk to you, consult, maybe get some training lined up, equally relevant for the recovery agents as it is for the lenders. I encourage people to take use of this resource. Look, if you're not an insider, you might not know, but Alex is the man. So Alex, what's an easy way for folks to get a hold of you or LocateSmarter?
My email address is alex.price@locatesmarter.com. Phone number 251-366-7669. Any of your listeners would be more than happy to give them a free test on LocateSmarter. They've got some great data at the best price points in the industry, period, bar none, end of statement. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have a private Facebook group that I've been having a blast with called Skip Guru's Tribe that I thought would maybe have 10 or 20 people in it. And it's ballooned up to 3,000 plus.
Wow.
And that's all we do is talk about skip tracing and their techniques, OSNIT, new books, new products, etc.
That's fantastic. Alex, I love to hear it, man. It's like the social media stuff has been good to both of us. I think it's nice that format allows us old dogs to kind of learn some new things. It's been good, and I do applaud you for that. Once again, everybody, it's been Alex Skip Guru Price. He's the director of training and development at LocateSmarter. Alex, thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. God bless, and I'll end like I always do. Be blessed, be safe, and happy hunting.